welcome to Dear Katie, the podcast that amplifies courageous voices and real stories of resilience, healing, and hope after trauma. Inspired by the many letters Katie has received over the last 20 years, each week she interviews survivors, healers, and experts to honor their stories and explore the many paths to healing and hope. Before we begin, please know, many episodes of Dear Katie cover sensitive topics related to sexual violence, trauma, and recovery. Listen with care and take the space you need to take care of yourself. Your well-being is what matters most. Now, let's join Katie and today's guest for a conversation that matters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. As you all know, my name is Katie Kessner, and I am your host for our show. I just remind you, grab that journal if you haven't yet, and take notes. Whatever sparks your attention, you think that would be a good spot to start. You never know what you're going to hear. Each and every one of our guests is so incredible. And if at any point you need to take a break, we'll be right here when you come back. So I know you're going to love today's guest. I just got the pleasure of meeting him in person out in Seattle at a student-led conference on consent and sexual assault. So how fun is that, that high schools are taking leadership and owning this topic? I only wish it had happened about 35 years ago, but it's never too late. So I'll tell you a little bit about Julian, and then he will tell you a lot more. So Julian Bell is a retired U.S. Coast Guard Chief Warrant Officer. Oh, gosh. Warrant officer. That means like you're in trouble, I think. With 23 years of service and the founder of Safe Waters. Safe Waters is a nonprofit dedicated to supporting survivors of sexual assault and harassment in the military community. During his career, he served as a victim advocate and worked to elevate survivor voices and push for greater accountability within institutional systems. After witnessing the gaps in support for many survivors, he helped build Safe Waters to provide peer connection, resources, and community-centered healing. Julian is now preparing to pursue a graduate degree in counseling psychology so he can continue supporting survivors through trauma-informed care. He lives in California with his wife and kiddos and remains deeply, I shouldn't say kiddos, I don't even know how old they are. They could be like grown people, and remains deeply committed to advocacy, healing, and cultural change. Oh my goodness. Welcome, Julian. So good to have you.
Great. No, thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So you're in California now. So were you born there as well, or where did you grow up?
Sure. I've been everywhere. So I grew up in the military. My father was also in the Coast Guard. I was coincidentally born in San Francisco. Lived on Treasure Island as a kid back when that was Navy housing back in the 80s. Wow. Yeah. And then just did the military thing, moved around, went to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Cuba for a while, back to Carolinas, Virginia. And then I joined in 2003, and I've lived all over the place. San Diego, Maine, San Francisco, Michigan, Baltimore, goodness. Houston, Florida, and now back to California. And
that's
I'm in Santa Barbara.
Julian.
Yeah.
I'm
ready to stop.
It sounds dizzying, but maybe it's just it becomes a lifestyle. It's not like a domicile is any place where you happen to set up shop and sleep.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how. I only know kind of how I felt doing the travel and speaking. I was like, my domicile is either a dorm room on some college campus for the night, or some guest host family has me there, or is wherever sometimes it was sleeping in the airport, when flights weren't running on time. So I at least have some transient homestead situation in my past, but it's probably nothing like growing up as a child that way too. And did you have siblings as well?
I do. I have an older sister, older brother, younger brother, and then my father remarried, and I have two younger half brothers. So big extended family. Yes.
That's definitely a lot. And then you went to high school? Did you go to any? I think there's some military high schools, or was it always like a public school? Like, where were you going to school during all this shifting?
Yeah, it was always public school, with the exception of kindergarten. That's when we lived in Cuba, and that was on Guantanamo Bay. So that was all military DoD run. Just kindergarten. Other than that, I just bounced around from public school system to public school system
you probably could do a good critique of that system at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be favorable at all, but I'm certain you could come up with some best practices since you had to sample a bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of exposure, I guess you'd say, as a kid.
Yeah,
So
actually, I was curious, Julian. I know we're different ages, but when you were going through that, did any of the schools have any like wellness education or health? Did you have to take health class? Did you have any of that?
wow, yeah. So thinking back, I think I remember first experience was maybe fifth or sixth grade,
Hmm.
and it was sexual education, and it was very. I mean, it's at that age, it's basic, right? But I don't remember much of anything talked about consent or real health. You know, it was basically like this is what a penis is, this is what a vagina is, and
Body parts.
yeah, like really cringy videos that we had to watch back when they'd roll in the TV into the room and put it on a VHS, you know.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's about all I remember from it. And I don't remember much in high school. Um, and definitely didn't have conversations as a kid with my parents or anything like that. It was just, we didn't talk about stuff, you know. It was just kind of like trial by fire. You go out there and figure it out on your own.
Did
Um,
you, another question, did you have any like girlfriend, boy, like friends? Do you have, like what was the, since you were your friends, your family, like how is the friendship and romantic situation at that age? I'm just curious too, how do you do that when you're like, oh, I really like you, but I'll be gone in like 6 months?
yeah. Yeah. By the time I got to that age where I started to notice, you know, the opposite sex for me, like interested in girls and women, that was like high school, middle school, high school age. And my first girlfriend, I think, was like sixth grade, you know, and it was like holding hands at the park and, you know, like that kind of stuff, nothing serious. And then not until high school, but senior year, I actually had a girlfriend I would consider a girlfriend, you know. By then, I was done moving. My father had retired from the service. I lived with him in Virginia. So I didn't have any plans to move. So the romantic side was never an issue. But as far as friends were concerned at a younger age, just, you know, my playmates and best friends, like I always had one foot out the door, you know. Um,
Um,
yeah, it was kind of it's a lonely feeling, you know, because you're always thinking
yeah,
of, all right, we're friends now, but I'm going to enjoy it, but it's not going to last,
yeah,
you
that's
know.
really hard, I
Yeah,
think.
it's hard,
Well,
but it teaches you adaptability as well. And there's still some friends, even going back to high school, that I still keep in touch with, you know, 30 years later, 25 years later. So, you know,
that's
the true
good.
friends stick around. Yeah,
That's
yeah. And
nice.
yeah.
And so when you said you were in high school and then you were going to live with your dad in Virginia kind of permanently
Yeah, that
or
was the plan. And I didn't have any post high school plans at that time. I was pretty
Mhm.
aloof as a kid. I mean, academically, I was smart, you know, I was like a straight A and B student. But I just didn't have the drive. Um, I didn't want to go to college at that time. I didn't have a career in mind. So I graduated at 17 years old.
Oh
And
gosh.
then, yeah, I moved in with my sister. So I left Virginia and I went to Asheville, North Carolina. And I lived with her for about a year, just working at a bookstore, you know,
Mhm.
and kind of figuring things out at that time. And then I kind of stumbled backwards into the military. It
Wait,
wasn't.
wait. Stumbled backwards. Explain that part.
Yeah, I remember. So my father was in the Coast Guard. My older brother was in the Coast Guard at that time. He just retired a few years ago, so I knew
Mhm.
about it, right? And when I was younger, I remember as a younger teenager, I swore I'd never join. You know, I was like, there's no way. Um, and then I'm 18 years old, living with my sister. And her partner at the time, and this is 2003, early 2003, and I remember watching the bombing of Iraq.
Oh, right.
Um, yeah, like when we first started that whole invasion and all that stuff. And I've had this feeling of like being a part of something bigger than myself. And it was actually for me, it was between the Marines and the Coast Guard. You know, those two were the ones that kind of stood out to me, made sense to me. And ultimately, I went with the Coast Guard because it felt more humanitarian in nature. They're known as the lifesavers and protectors of the sea and all that kind of stuff. So I spoke about it with my brother and then with my father. And before I knew it, I was in a recruiter's office, and it was kind of I was like, I'll do it for a few years, maybe see how it is, go to college, get my benefits. Here I am 23 years later, retiring. So
Oh, wait. Like now, oh, right now? You just retired?
I am retired. Actually, I'm still in. I'm technically retiring in May, but I'm on leave right now. So,
No, I didn't know
yeah.
that part. Oh gosh, you
Yeah.
skipped a whole bunch. Okay, let's go
Sorry.
back. No, that was like, wow, we just went through 23 years really fast. But I like what you said, Julian, about, that seemed the more humanitarian. Like I'm thinking, like, if you are really familiar and have grown up around war, and meaning parents in the military, and my grandfather was a police chief and my dad was an FBI agent and in the military before being in the FBI. So I think I was protected from the reality of that because he was undercover a lot, Julian. So my dad would just disappear for 2-3 weeks with no way of talking to him or knowing what he was up to, because he wasn't even allowed to tell us.
Wow.
And so I guess what I'm thinking about is, like, as you make all these choices and we have these assumptions, and maybe it's part perception of what your dad was the military, not your mom.
Correct.
Okay. And so did your dad ever, when you were growing up, talk about what he was doing, or was that a table conversation? Or was he kind of just like, let that go, I'm home with the family, not talking about work?
Yeah, I don't remember much discussion about work as a kid.
Okay.
I mean, I knew the basics. I remember going to the base sometimes and seeing where he worked and different ships that he was on with the Coast Guard. We call them cutters in the Coast Guard. But I remember, and he'd be gone sometimes. He'd be underway. And it was just, you don't think about it when you're that young. It's just,
Right.
it is what it is. And the conversations weren't really about work at home that I remember. But growing up in a military community, a lot of the times we lived on housing, like I mentioned, Treasure Island,
Mm-hmm.
Cuba. Like, we're just surrounded by military members all the time. All your friends are military kids. All um, your parents' friends are all military. So it's just this language
Mm-hmm.
that you grow up in.
Right.
So you're surrounded by it, and people are getting deployed or sent out or whatever. And it's just there. It's just
Yeah,
the way it was.
I think it's good. I'm sorry, I'm going into this more, but I think what I'm trying to think about is, I know we're going to talk about what happened when you were in the military, but I think it's always interesting. Like, we could say a parallel would be someone who was assaulted within the Boy Scouts or within the church community, or me going off to college. I think this amazing, pristine Williamsburg, Virginia, that has like toy people walking around. You have these expectations of what this should be like. And
Hmm.
there's zero part of any of the setup that includes, and by the way, you might also be assaulted. Like, you know what I mean? And so I was just curious, like, so far, just thinking your backstory is really important to me, because I think it's important for all of us to, as survivors, just to start thinking sometimes, like, what were we thinking before?
Hmm.
And what had we assumed about the world? And then how jarring it is to have that shattered and then have to find a way through it, because it's not like a book where you start to see it coming.
Hmm.
Right? There's no foreshadowing. I don't know. We'll talk about that. But okay, so when you started out, how was, like, the first part of your, Coast Guard experience? Like, and
Yeah.
then we can get to where we need to go. But
Sure.
so when you get there, is it all you ever expected? Is it,
Yeah.
basic
And
training is hell and hard?
absolutely, yeah. So, the basic training for us is in Cape May, New Jersey. And it's 2 months, 8 weeks, and it's all the normal stuff. It's the yelling, the screaming, the waking up at 2 in the morning to go do push-ups in the mud, and like all that stuff. And they teach
It's
you
for
basic
real.
seamanship, and they're teaching you, like, the core values of the Coast Guard and what our missions are, and like all that stuff, right? So after that 8 weeks or so, you come out and you're ready. Like, you're ready to do the work, and you're charged, and it's so different than anything I could have expected. And I spoke about it with, obviously, my brother, who had just been through it a few years before I did.
Mhm.
And and he was just very positive about his experience.
Wow.
And he was on a ship in San Francisco at the time after when I joined, and he loved it. He was underway. He was going around the Pacific Ocean and seeing all these islands and like doing, drug searches and migrants and this and that. Like, it was so exciting, right? But again, like you said, there was nothing leading up to what was going to happen to me. There was no semblance of that. If I had known, I probably wouldn't have joined, right? So, but anyway, so like when I got to my ship after boot camp, I was in San Diego.
Wait, one quick question. So this was 23 years ago. So were there many, like, what was the percentage of women in the Coast Guard with you, and both with you and above you? Do you remember?
Sure.
I'm sure you remember.
Yeah. And in boot camp, we had females in our company, and they had their own, we call them squad bays. That's where you have all the beds and you sleep and shower. So they had their own squad bay. And I would say somewhere from 10 to 15% were probably women, mostly men. And same thing when you got out into the fleet, roughly about the same percentage. It's male dominant for sure.
So what let's do one more quick note too, that you probably didn't know this, Julian, but I was a speaker at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, in New London.
New London. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe 5 times. I've spoken there. And so I'm just trying to think when I would look out at that class, and the professors were all men, and this would have been like from late 90s, but that's probably, you were starting in the 00s, right?
Correct.
Around 2003, or is that right?
2003 is when I joined. Yep.
Yeah, that might have been the tail end of when I spoke there. But my last speech there was to the professors and staff around sexual misconduct and harassment and boundaries. So just for context, like, just think about this. Like, when you're going to tell what happened, I was just like saying, okay, where was the Coast Guard in terms of training? Not that I was the only provider in the world of training, but I was one of few. There were not many of us doing that kind of public speaking and training. So I thought it might be interesting for you to know that right around when you were starting was when I was teaching the leadership at the academy about this issue.
That's interesting.
And the Merchant Marines, not that I know you're totally, no, a lot of people are like, what are the Merchant Marines? But they're in New York on the Long Island. And I only got to speak there once because they were more reticent to have me at all. And that was so hard. I don't know what's up with that, but anyway, so for context, like, training had just started happening, because I know when I started the Coast Guard Academy, no one had done anything. And their very nice, hopeful leader who brought me in, I'm sure he's retired and maybe not even alive, but it was really hard for him to get buy-in, to get any awareness. So just let's start there too, for the context. Not that it doesn't excuse anything, right? It excuses nothing, but I thought it might be interesting for any of our listeners to know, like, context for when you're starting and what's going on with military training at the time.
Right. And that's wonderful. No, that's excellent. I think I want to put a pin in that too, about your speaking at the academy later on in my story, because it definitely ties into my story. Like, I mean, it's amazing that you said that. So, all right, I think it's perfect.
Okay.
So, so when I joined and went to my ship in San Diego, I remember my first day. So I flew in from Virginia. I went from boot camp in New Jersey to see some family in Virginia before flying to my assignment. And I flew into San Diego, my first time there. I'm in my uniform, and I turned 19 in boot camp. So I was 19 years old. And I was picked up by another ship. We call them shipmates, another Coast Guard member.
Yep.
who was assigned to just pick me up from the airport, bring me to the boat, and and like I said, you come out of boot camp and you're so ready to go. You're so like, I mean, your hair is perfect. You're walking straight, and your uniform is crisp and clean. And then here comes people from the boat that are. Yeah, and these guys from the boat that've been there for 6 months, like they're senior seamen, senior leaders, for me, are all grouchy and gruff, and their uniforms look like crap, and you're like, is this where I'm going? Okay.
Right? Am I around these men for a long time?
Yeah, and I get on the ship, and this guy drops me off in my berthing area. The berthing area is like where you sleep and your shower and stuff like that while you're on the ship. And he's like, yeah, this is where you're sleeping. This is your rack. This is your locker. And see you later. Basically, I'm like, okay, where do I go? Like, and someone else, someone else grabs me, and he's like, hey man, let me show you around. I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. And he takes me from our berthing area, and I'll never forget this. And we take a right towards the front of the ship, and that's where like I'm on the deck force. So I work like on painting and chipping and standing navigation watch, right? So when you walk forward on the ship inside, that's where all the tools and paint and all the things that you need, the equipment, right? And that's where so there's a lot of traffic there. There's a lot of people getting equipment and stuff like that. I walk in, and to the left there's a tool locker, right? And there's a tall, skinny guy about my age. He's in there and he's just tinkering around, getting some wrenches or whatever he's doing. And the guy I'm with looks at him and he says, you see that guy right there? And I'm like, yeah, I see him. He's like, that guy, don't be like him. He's a fucking pussy. Can I cuss on this podcast?
Yeah,
okay. Too late.
You're good.
He's like, he's a fucking pussy.
I'll tell you if we're in trouble, Julian.
Thanks. Cool. And he says, he's a piece of shit. He said he's going to kill himself. He can't handle it here. So he's getting kicked out. Don't be like him. And that was my first 10 minutes on the ship, and I see this guy, and he just looks so distraught, and I'm like, okay, all right. And so I learned okay, don't speak up, obviously, don't say anything because you're going to get railroaded. And that's just my first instance, of that kind of thing. And that was every day. That was just the culture. It was like a work hard, play hard mentality. If you show any weakness, you're going to get singled out. And this wasn't just by the junior people, it was by senior people too. They would ride you hard, meaning if you screw up once, you're done, and if you complain about something, you're done.
But when you say, Julian, you're done, and you also, I want to go back and ask two really quick questions. You're done and play hard, work hard, play hard. So what's play hard mean on a ship? And then also, you're done means are you ridiculed? Are you relegated to worse tasks? Just so we have context, because you know what that means in your head. And I'm like, what does that look like on a ship? Are they partying? Or is there boogie down? Is there drinking? You can't bring any non-military. So if there's sex, it's who's doing I'm just curious. A porn,
all of it.
So, all of it. They have all of the things.
You have all of that. It was like a floating high school in some ways, the rumor mills and this and that. But it was, and so we had the ship, and then most of us younger people that weren't married, we lived in the barracks right there, just off the ship, right? Okay. So it's kind of like this roving back and forth. So when we're underway, you're on the ship for months at a time, and that's your people, and you pull into a port somewhere, and that's the play hard part, right? So you pull into Mexico, or you pull into Guatemala, or wherever, you pull into the Philippines, and that's the play hard, right? And that's what you may think of stereotypical old school sailor stuff, where they go in and rape and pillage, basically. Yeah, it's
buy women.
And it's a lot of alcohol. People were doing a lot of drugs and stuff,
and that
too.
Was just regular routine.
That was just the way it was, And what I mean by getting rode hard, or you would be ostracized, right? So if you spoke out against stuff, or if you were seen as weak, or a shitbag, or a dirtbag, as I like to call you, they made your life hell. You'd get extra duty. You wouldn't be trusted with anything. They would find some way to process. It was just this, especially for most of us younger people on the boat, first time away from home, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you screw up, and then they just single you out, and you're just going to keep screwing up, right? You're just going to keep screwing up. You're going to keep and it's, everything you do is just you're on watch, right? You're on like we say, you're on radar. Like someone's always looking out for you or watching, and you just can't win. And so many people I knew that were suicidal or got hooked on drugs or heavy drinking. And then the inappropriate relationships, a lot of, it's always, if it's in blue, it's not for you, right? So that's what they would say, like blue uniform, you're not supposed to have sex with it or date it, right? But that was never followed. I mean, not everybody, but very common, right? Especially for the women. And this was up and down the chain of command. Like I would hear it in conversation. It was, as soon as a new female would report on board, it was basically who's going to get her first, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. And it was a game. It was just a game. And that was the culture that I stepped into, right? So coming from boot camp where you're just like, they don't teach you that stuff. They don't talk about that stuff. You have no semblance of that kind of lifestyle, right? You think it's going to be safe. You think everyone has the core values of honor, respect, and devotion to duty. And you have all these grandiose ideas coming from boot camp, and you go out there and it's not that at all, right? And it was very confusing as a 19-year-old. It's very isolating.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I found a core group of friends that I could trust at first, and actually a couple of them I still talk to this day, like very, very close friends that survived this with me. And I'm grateful, but yeah, it was really, really hard to be put in that position.
Yeah. It sounds like the whole system's a bit messed up.
Yeah.
But okay, so this is the intro. That was really helpful, Julian. I got a better sense for sure. And you mentioned 2 months, like you're usually out to sea for 2 months.
It depends on the ship, but my ship at that time, it could be, we broke down a lot because it was an old ship, but
Oh my gosh.
3 to 5 months was typical.
Oh wow, long time.
Yeah, and then you come back and you repairs and maintenance, and then go back.
And alcohol was allowed on the ship?
No, but it was there.
And what about marijuana or like other drugs?
Yeah, absolutely not allowed. But
Not
people
allowed.
would either bring it underway with us, or when we got to a port, they would do it. Or when we were in San Diego, people were doing, like in the barracks, for example. I mean, I knew people that were doing meth, and it was crazy. There were people cooking meth in the barracks. Like, it was nuts. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Julian, what a hard thing. And I think it's so interesting because, my dad never told me anything about Vietnam at all. And I don't know what your dad, you said your dad didn't say much. So how would we know any different other than, okay, so you're doing this, and so you're surviving somehow, and you must be going in your head like, how am I going to do this for another 23 years?
Yeah.
But I guess I could ask that, like, when did you start to say, oh my gosh, how can I get through this?
It didn't really hit me until I got in trouble on the boat myself. So I mentioned it was like you work hard, you stay quiet, right? And you're going to be okay. I got in trouble with drinking in the barracks. I was 19 at the time. And long story short, I got in some trouble. Basically, I had to pay $200, and I had 14 days of extra duty. And when that happens at such a junior or early stage in your career, you're basically put on notice by policy, right? If you mess up again within 6 months, then you're discharged. So I knew, I was like, all right, I better straighten up really good this time. And I had that feeling I need to get out of here. I don't want to screw up, but I also need to get off this boat somehow. So I really put my head down and started working extra hard, which was good in a way. Like, I cleaned up for a bit, I was like, okay, I can do that. I can be quiet. I'm good at being quiet. I can work hard. I'm really good at that. So I just won't screw around in the barracks, and I'll be okay. And that was my first internal battle with that, of like, this environment's not good for me. I should probably look at other avenues in the Coast Guard, right? So part of that working hard was I was learning a specific job, a specific skill set, which I thought would get me off the ship. And once I was qualifying in that position, it was like a navigator. I was told that I would be staying on the ship. And I said, no, I'm not. And so and the way it works is when you're that junior, you don't have a specialty yet. So you sign up for a school to learn a specialty, right? So I signed up for a school that was like a short list. It was like 3 or 4 month waiting. Some schools are like 3 years you have to wait. So this one was like wide open. And I was like, you know what? This is going to get me off the ship. I'm out of here. And that was a little bit later on. But that was what I did.
Okay. Oh my gosh, Julian. So I guess you're setting us all up for what happened. And can you, I don't want to lose out on the chance to go into healing too. So can we talk about, I don't even know how or when or how, I just know from the blurb I read in our Moments meeting that you're a survivor. So do you feel okay to talk about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for opening like that. I appreciate that. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable.
Okay. Well, you don't have to be very comfortable. No, I don't know that that's ever great, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
you're there. Like,
Yeah.
I'm ready. And I'll just say it this way, Julian, the fact that you said that's so interesting, because I asked Anthony Edwards, he's the Goose. He was
Revenge of the
Goose.
Nerds too. Yeah.
And he's a male survivor. And in my interview with him, I asked him if he could play a rapist. I said, you're such a great actor. Could you actually be the rapist? And he didn't even bat an eye. He was like, yep, I could do that. And so you reminded me of him, because you had such confidence when you said that, which means how he said it. Like he's solid now, or at least, solid as you can be, not that we don't ever have moments. But that's what you reminded me of, just not to compare you to an award-winning actor.
I'll take it. Yeah.
But very solid. So you're ready. So how far in, you painted such a good picture. So can you give us a little bit before context?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, I got in trouble on the boat, and I was put on this probationary period, and everyone knows it, right? So it's not a secret. It's open. So when they do those punishments, typically everyone's invited to come watch. It's part of good order and discipline. So everyone knows, right? Everyone knows, including what would turn out to be my future rapist, right?
Okay.
So, like I mentioned, I really started to work hard. I stopped drinking in the barracks. I really wanted to clean myself up and just keep my head low and do what I needed to do. But one day, he comes to me after work, and he's like, "Hey, man, I know it's been tough, but if you want to just hang out, I have a couple buddies, and we have some beers. And if you just want to just really chill, man, just have some beers, hang out, no big deal." And I was like, you know what, I've been good. And I was like, I could just have a beer, and I'll be okay. I just want to go and just relax for a bit. This guy, I don't really know him that well. We're on the same ship, but never hung out with him. He seems like a decent enough guy. He's really quiet, and why not? Why not,
Yep.
So I go into the barracks, and quick description of the barracks. So it's a 12-story building. The 12th floor was the Coast Guard. There was 2 ships, and then everything below us was all Navy. So it's a Navy base. So I go to my room on the 12th floor, and he asked me to meet him. I can't remember specifically, but I think it was the 6th floor, something like that. And I go down the stairwell, and I walk down this long hallway, fluorescent lights, white brick walls. And he's there with 2 other people, 2 other men that were in the Navy. They said that I can't remember their names, don't remember what they worked. There's a lot of ships on that base, a lot of whatever. And they just start talking to me, just normal. Hey, what's your name? How are you? Cool. Yeah, and it was really quick. They handed me a beer and a blue plastic cup. And
not in was the beer in a keg?
No, so they had a 12-pack of Bud Light, and they gave me a cup with poured beer in it. They poured some beer into a blue Solo cup.
Yeah.
And
Was that what? I don't know. Good. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
taking ideas in. Okay.
yeah. Hmm.
And there's three guys and
Yeah.
you, and the room is it bigger than a dorm room? Like, what's the size of this
So
space?
we're in the hallway.
Oh, you're in the hallway still.
Yeah, and there's no one else around, so I don't know. Looking back on it, I don't know if they were doing renovations on that floor. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I didn't see anybody else, and we're just talking. And it wasn't uncommon for people to drink in the hallways, and like it was like Animal House. Like people were drinking everywhere all the time. Like,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I
Did civilians come up in there?
no, well, you would sneak them in sometimes,
That's what I
but they
was
weren't
gonna
allowed.
wonder about. Like, if girls would come in there and
Oh, sure, and then
Mhm.
girls from other boats and this and that. Like, so
Right.
it's all that stuff.
Okay.
Um,
And this is you're now 20. Or are you still
Still,
19?
I was 19, almost 20. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I start drinking from this cup,
Hmm.
and it doesn't take long. I don't remember what they were saying or what I was saying, but everything gets really blurry, and like the world just kind of zooms in, focus ins and out. And I lean back, and as I'm falling back, one of them grabs me from behind, grabs my shoulders, and kicks open the door behind him to a room and goes, "Here we go." And he drags me,
Oh, God.
and the room was empty. There's furniture there, but I remember there's no mattress, there's no blankets on the sheet on the beds, there's no furniture other than the mattresses and like an empty desk, So it was an
Mhm.
empty room, nobody occupied it. And then they threw me face down on the mattress, and they raped me, all three of them.
Oh, my God.
And I couldn't talk. I couldn't. I remember my tongue felt like a piece of rubber, and I remember trying to say like, like why stop, but it just, it came out like that. And I don't know how long I was in that room. I can tell you exactly how that mattress felt, exactly how it looked, the stitching on it. I remember white stitching on a blue mattress and little like floral patterns in between the stitching. I remember the wallpaper to my left. It was like gray vertical stripes. But after some time, I come to, they're all gone. And I'm my pants and underwear around my ankles. And I just remember pulling them up. And it was like I was floating, like I wasn't really there. And I somehow floated back to my room on the 12th floor and passed out. And it wasn't till I think the next day when I went to the restroom and there was blood. And I remember wiping, seeing the blood, and flushing the toilet. And that was the last time I thought of it. I completely I knew, like, again, going back to how the ship was, how my life was, I didn't have anyone I could speak up to or talk to. And as you mentioned, the Coast Guard was just sort of talking about sexual assault. We had some policies in place, but they sucked. We didn't have victim advocates. We didn't have the programs that we have in place now. I knew I was alone, and go more into my story after this, but I know what I did and why I repressed it was survival. My 19-year-old self could not come to terms with it had just happened to me. I could not. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, and that was to keep quiet and just live my life. But it started to come out in other ways, right? And so I just went back to work. I eventually got on that school list, like I mentioned, and I got off the ship. But in that meantime, I really got back into drinking. I mean, really got back into drinking. And then when I went to school in Virginia, and I was stationed in Portland, Maine after that, and that's when I finally turned 21, so I could legally drink. So what did I do? I moved upstairs from a bar, literally an apartment above a bar on the west end of Portland. Cool little place, but I just drank, and that's how I coped, and it was like a dissociative state for a very long time. I look back on that time in my life and realize, like, I didn't feel like I was even alive. I didn't feel like I was in my body. I knew I was working. I knew I was in the Coast Guard. I knew, like, I could tell you the addresses of where I lived, but so many of my memories are just detached. And, like, I see pictures of things and myself at that time, and it doesn't feel real still, So
Um,
anyway, yeah, that was my assault, and I
wait,
just buried it.
thank you. My gosh, I can see everything, and I'm so grateful. I asked him to be on the show, and that you were so willing to share that. Um, I was thinking, I mean, I asked you all about growing up and girls and all that I just wanted to get to know you better to understand. I didn't even know what you were going to tell us about what happened. Um, I'm curious about, like, as a male survivor, a couple of things. Like, I just want to ask you, like, a couple of things. Like, I know you're repressing everything, and you're barely, you're 19, not even 20, and it was survival mode. In the order, I guess, as you started thinking about it, like what it was, or how to analyze it, if that makes sense, other than the numbness that you were seeking. So, like, many of us do, right? To numb it out is easier than to think about it. But in those moments of sobriety, I guess I'm curious, as a male survivor, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm kind of thinking out loud. For me, and like, I was trying to numb, but I was also crushed because one of the philosophical, like, the fundamental thing for me was, oh, you must stay a virgin. Like, my parents were really strict. So as a woman, I had been robbed of that choice. And, I don't know what your sexual history was up until then, and you don't have to share it. But I'm thinking there's these cornerstones of, especially, you and I'm 18, you were 19, like, of what we thought about our sexuality or our bodies. And one of the biggest problems for men, obviously, is homophobia.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, some men say I was worried I was gay, or I was so ashamed, like, or my parents would, like, if I ever told it, someone would be like, oh, of course you would have fought for your life, and you would have to overdo the drugging. I don't even know in your head, like, what was that? Like, for me, that was one of the things. And then another thing was, which you might have heard me say in my speech, it was just justice and injustice. But you didn't have as many choices. I thought I had no choices. You had no choices. Like, I chose to give up my parents' support, but this is your career now. And it's not, like, for me, I could go to a different college maybe, or figure out another job. But I guess that's the other thing I was thinking is, like, what are some of the things that started to unravel or tighten up, like, in your mind as you start to process? And I can almost think, like, as you drink the first one or two, those might be the top of mind when you start to, like, relax enough to go think about it. And then luckily by the fifth drink, you're not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But for a couple drinks, you're thinking about it.
Yep.
I don't even know if that makes sense either, to say it that way. But I'm just trying to think, like, with you, or, like, if you've talked about that. I don't even know if you've talked about that, but
Mm-hmm.
or thought about it. But can you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, yeah. I think for me, it's just this more. Maybe in the aftermath, years later, some of these things came out more in my mind, and as
Like,
I started opening.
when though, like, do you think you bottled it really tightly packed for, like, 5 years, or, like,
Yeah.
do you really think you did it? That's like heroic strength of bottling up.
Yeah, I was really good at that.
And that's what I was curious about. Like, how long could you hold it?
12 years until I finally came out with my story. But when
Oh my gosh. Okay.
part of that, you're
Thank you.
mentioning, like, the sexuality, and yeah, that was there. I am heterosexual, and I think that was a stigma that's associated. But not so much innately in me. I was fortunate, I guess you'd say fortunate enough to grow up around homosexual. Like my sister is openly gay, was since the 90s,
Okay.
and I love her more than anybody in the universe. So like I remember going to like gay pride when I was like 16, and like so like that wasn't necessarily like the scary thing for me.
Okay.
But what the military had at that time, I'm sure you're familiar, was with the don't ask, don't tell policy,
Right.
right? So you could be gay as long as you're in the closet, right? And that was definitely part of the culture. And I know, like, that rapists and abusers use that to their advantage 100%. I mean,
Oh,
how much better way to keep someone quiet than to, especially male on male or female on female
right.
victim of like,
Right.
you speak out, you're probably going to lose your job, because you could be outed as being a homosexual. Like, oh my God, it's like there is that systemic pressure on me from the military. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And gays were openly ridiculed on the boat. Like, I mean, it was, if you were suspected of being gay, it was like, like I said, it was like a high school. It's ridiculous. So,
Right.
so that definitely helped. It made it easier for me to like, yep, I can keep this down, like I don't have to think about it.
Okay.
So,
That makes a lot of
and
sense.
yeah, so I mean, like the Herculean effort of keeping it repressed, it was there. I realized how strong I am and how strong my mind is in protecting me. So for 12 years, I just lived my life, coincidentally, one of the things I was really good at was work, right? And I worked really
Mhm.
hard and I made it up the ranks really fast, everyone, so looking at me from the outside, right, was here's Julian, he's kicking ass, he's got it together. I got
Superstar.
married, I had a baby and all this stuff, and I was just shooting up the ranks like as fast as I possibly could. So I could drown myself in work. That was never a problem, so it was a
Mhm.
really good distraction. And plus I did a lot of good stuff, like I really did. I'm proud of a lot of the service I did. Um,
Mhm.
but I see it too as definitely a way for me to just escape and avoid what I needed to face. So, do you want to get into when I finally came out with my story and how that all
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. When did you get married?
The first time, so that
Oh,
was in,
I didn't know you got
yeah,
married more than once. Sorry.
yeah, I'm on my second marriage. It's
Okay,
okay.
okay. And
Uh,
okay. So
yeah, I
the
got
first one.
married, first one, 2008. So I was 23, almost 24
Oh my
when
gosh,
I got
that's so
married.
soon after.
I
Okay.
know. Yeah, a few years
Okay.
after. And then I had my son in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was doing all the normal stuff. I was moving around the country and
Your
doing my
first
thing.
wife was not military, or she was?
No, no, she's
Okay.
not. No.
Did you just meet her in a port, or like?
Yeah, I know. I met her in Maine actually through a friend,
Oh,
a mutual friend, birthday party. That's how I met her.
okay.
Um, yep.
Okay.
And
So 2012. So you're still married, and then you have a son.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
And
And
then
then I
and
get
then what happened?
promoted, and I go in 2016. I moved to Houston, and I make a new position. That's when I become a chief warrant officer. Like a
Oh
W
yeah,
two.
that's what
Yeah.
I was like. Does that really mean that like you're on the arrest and
No,
or no,
it just
you
means
work warrant? Like what is
yeah,
that?
it just means you're a technical specialist in whatever field you're in. It's like if you're a
Oh,
boat driver, if you're a engineer, whatever it is, right? So that's what that means.
it sounds good
So
though.
yeah, it sounds cool.
Sounds
It sounds
very
cooler
like
than this.
okay.
Official.
All
Yeah.
right.
So I make that, and part of that is you're expected to go to a leadership academy for 2 weeks in New London at the Coast Guard Academy, right, where you're familiar with.
Oh, right.
And it was a 2 week class, and I've been through tons of leadership training at that point. Like I was just checking the box, doing what I had to do.
Hmm.
And one 8-hour session of that, this is 2016 again, so like this was kind of big in the news. A lot of things were happening with sexual assault. So the Coast Guard was kind of jumping on things, and that's when we established sexual assault response coordinators, SARCs as we call them.
Hmm.
Victim advocacy started coming online, and we had a
Ah, that's right.
class. We had a class. It was 8 hours taught by the Academy SARC. Her name's Shannon Nornberg, and I'll never forget that day when she was given this training, and I didn't want to be there because we've heard it all before. Yeah, sex assault, yada. I know how to make reports. I know what to do. I get it. But when she was talking, something inside of me started to bubble up, and
Mm.
it was a strange feeling. It was like an awakening kind of feeling, right? And I I remember at the end of class, I met her and I said, "Hey, Shannon, do you mind if I talk to you for a few minutes, just one-on-one, just me and you?" And she looked at me and she could tell, she could tell. She's like, "Yeah,
Oh,
let's go talk." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm like in a fog. When she puts us in a conference room, this big, long wooden table, just two of us. And she's like, "How can I help you, Mr. Bell?" And I took a breath and I said, "In 2004, when I was in San Diego on a ship, I was drugged and raped by three men. And that's the first time it ever came out of my mouth. That's the first time I recognized it. And that's when I felt it. In that room, I started shaking, convulsing, dry heaving. And that's when I physically started to go through my rape. And I realize now, looking back on it, like Shannon, the reason like I resonated so deep with her is finally as someone I felt safe with and could trust. And she shared this about herself before, but she's also one of us. And she's amazing, by the way. She's a whole other part of my story later on. But and that was it, you know, and I was so terrified. And that's when I started to feel all the feelings that people have after an assault, right? With and like I did that Herculean effort for 12 years of hiding it, repressing it. But when it came out, it just fell apart, you know. And boy, and that's when I went into the investigation with the Coast Guard, and my command was notified in Texas, and Coast Guard Medical was notified, and I still tried to hold on to this story, right? And I was still, I knew those things were happening, but I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell most of my family, with the exception of my sister. And it was just the most painful, scary, terrifying thing I went through, and it lasted for a long time. I started therapy and medication and all that stuff, you know. And needless to say, the investigation was a farce. I did my interview, and you know, I gave all these names of people that were friends of mine at the time and like maybe could corroborate something, and they didn't interview any of my friends. They didn't even check. I found that out later because I asked my friends years later, you know, and it's like, did they ever talk to you? Like, no. They did question my rapist, the one Coast Guard member. Remember the two Navy, I didn't know their names, so I couldn't tell you. I could tell their facial features. That's about it. They interviewed him, who was still in the Coast Guard. And of course, he denied it. And he got a lawyer, and the investigators came back to me and said, "We interviewed your accused rapist, and we believe him. What do you have to say about that? He says he didn't do anything. What do you have to say about that?" Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah. So I knew my investigation was over, and then I had to swallow that, and I just went through it. You know. Then I knew I was on my own again, and I took it. And I'm very tenacious, like. Very tenacious. That's one of my qualities, good and bad sometimes. But I was a bulldog with therapy. You know, I went all the time, and then I started group therapy, and I did all the assignments, read all the books that they told me to read, and I just wanted to get through it as fast as possible. But obviously, you know, like you don't get through it as fast as possible. Like I'm still working through stuff. It's amazing, you know, and it's okay. Like I've gotten to a point where I'm okay with that, but. So I did. I struggled so much for so long, and the investigation fell apart, and I just continued my life. And I started to feel a little bit better about 2 years later. I go off the meds, and then 2018, I'm diagnosed with cancer, and I'm diagnosed with soft tissue sarcoma in my pelvis, and it's abutting my rectum and my bladder. So part of the story I didn't tell you is I had physical problems and actually had to have a corrective surgery in 2008 for hemorrhoids. And that's when they did the surgery. They did a biopsy, and they found out that I had anal warts from those guys. And of course, I didn't speak up then either. But anyway, so I buried all that stuff. In 2018, I have cancer in that same area. I go through all that, went radiation, had ileostomy reversals. I'm okay now. But one of the things my doctors told me is, because I was like, how did this form? Like, why in such a rare place for that kind of cancer? And they're like, well, we're not quite sure. Has anything happened to you? And I told them about the rape and all that. And like when I came out with my rape was 2016. So when they did the surgery, took out my tumor, they said, yeah, this tumor's about 1.5 years old. That's when it started growing. I'm like, that's exactly when I met Shannon and told my story, like it all, like my body just manifested all this stuff. Crazy. So I went through that. Then I divorced my first wife because things were really falling apart at that point. This exacerbated those problems, right? And then I...
Wait. Can we, Julian?
Yeah, go ahead. Pause. Yes.
Hold on.
Sorry, there's a lot of my story.
That was a lot. That was, I didn't want to interrupt, but I do want to ask about, well, I don't want to ask about the cancer yet. I want to ask about the wife and the divorce and the son. I guess if you're comfortable talking about like how did intimacy work or not work, or maybe it's not even that so much as like, I think it's, you can have sex and not be intimate even, obviously. Or is it trust? Is it lack of support? Is it not understanding? Is it not wanting to give you what you needed? Like how many or do you say I was an asshole? Like, I don't know, like what, maybe all of the above. I don't know if you want to share any of that was hard for you or.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's fine. Thanks. It was difficult for her, obviously. Right. Because I changed overnight, right? Like this person that she knew all of a sudden was going through a crisis, and I don't want to speak ill of my ex-wife. She's the mother of my son, right? And I respect her, but she also had alcohol abuse issues, right? And that's what she would revert to in times of stress. And this was definitely a time of stress. And that compounded and went way off the charts, So I didn't have the support there. And my son, who was 3 when I first started my healing journey, it was a lot. It was just a lot to handle, right? And at the very first, this is something I didn't share, I was suicidal, right? And in 2016. And I didn't tell the Coast Guard this because going back to my first story of my first day on the ship, like what do they do with people when they say they are suicidal? They get kicked out, right? And I didn't want my kid to not have, money and, I didn't have a pension, all that stuff. So that I kept quiet. But anyway, so like that was part of it. And the only reason I didn't commit suicide was because of my son. I remember ready to attempt in my closet, and I heard him in the other room, heard his voice, and that's what stopped me, So, so all that was going on. It was really hard for my ex-wife. And she and I just started to grow further and further apart. And coincidentally enough, it was really after my cancer journey and when I started to heal, and that was a real wake-up call for me, as far as how I took care of myself physically and mentally. Like I was already doing the mental work with therapy, but physically I realized like I really need to clean myself up, right? And that's when I started exercising and running, and like really just like, I'm going to do this. And she was not about it, right? And it just really drove a wedge between us even further and further until finally it just had to be, right? We just had to call it quits after a while. So this is definitely a big part of it, though, right? Like, it really was.
That sounds, well, there's good and bad, right? I mean, the son was the good, and then the wife situation, not good. I guess, one question, it could pertain to second wife or just partnerships in general as a male survivor or any survivor. Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 things you think every partner should know to help their survivor partner?
Yeah.
Like should try, like 2 things that you think would be good practices, good techniques, good things to study.
Yeah, no, that's good because I've seen both sides of that coin, right? With my current wife, and obviously when I met my current wife, I told her about my assault by our second or third date, so it wasn't like this big internal secret. It was something I was very open and honest about, and I could tell her like, yeah, these are things I'm dealing with, right? And this is how I feel and my triggers, and just it had that open, honest communication from the get-go. Something I couldn't do when I was 22 or 23 with my first wife, because I didn't have those tools. So I saw 2 different sides of that. So if it's something that comes out within a relationship that you weren't expecting, which is what happened with my first one, like I would say as the spouse or partner of someone that is going through that, is just to do your best to give them the empathy and space that they need, right? And to support them and to have open and honest communication often. I think that's the key.
That's nice. I like that right there, Julian. Yeah, I wish we could that should be just a universal, but but it's easier to say it than do it, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's easier sometimes. Well, I don't know. I don't know. We'll stick on you. I was going to say, I don't know if your current wife is a survivor too, but sometimes I always think, is that harder if you both struggle, or is it better? But I think anything can be good or bad.
Sure.
Okay, so, oh my gosh, the cancer though, what happened with that? Like, that sounds really awful.
Yeah,
well,
it was
all
a lot.
of the things you just said, Julia, I'm sorry, you just told me like 10 things that were really awful. But that means you're even stronger. You've been through everything. But I guess you're alive, so the cancer it was treatable, or?
Yes. I still have yearly screenings, which is fine, but yeah, I had the radiation therapy, and then I had 2 different surgeries. I had a removal, and then I had a ileostomy for a while, like a bag. And that was reversed months later once I was able to heal. So yeah, I made it through that. And like, I remember being so frail and weak after all that, and just being physically at my lowest, right? And that's when I decided, like, I'm going to turn this around. I remember I joined a gym, and I was living in Houston at the time. And I tell my wife this now because she sees me, like, I run marathons and crap. And I was like, you should have seen me in like 2018, 2019. Like, when I remember joining the gym, and it was like a remedial weight class I joined. It was me and like all the geriatrics. Nothing against them, but like people in their 70s and 80s that were lifting like 5-pound curls, and I could barely do that. Like, I remember doing farmers carries with like 10-pound weights, and I'm like exhausted within like 10 feet. And I look back on that, and I see, like, I'm proud of that, right? I'm proud of how far I've come and how much I've turned that around, and how you can recover, right? It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of that tenacity and determination. But I made it through.
Do you think that was all self-generated, or do you think, you mentioned your son, was any part of it motivation for him? Was it you adore your sister? I guess was it all of you doing that, like saying and what was the goal? Like, I'm doing this because, I guess I'm curious the because part.
My son was a big piece of that. And I remember one of the few times I really cried during my cancer journey. I was in one of my checkups with my specialist, and it was before my surgery, and she just asked how I was doing, and I started crying, and I said, I don't want my son to grow up without a dad. And that just and I just sat there and cried, and then I went to my therapist and got it all out. But like, that was a huge motivation for me. It's like my son growing up without me. And that was definitely the biggest piece. It was it, and I realized that if I wanted to be here for him, I need to be here for myself, and really take care of myself, and be serious about it. So I did.
That's awesome. Yeah. I guess the last couple things. So you've gone on you mentioned the deep water, and when did you start putting that idea together?
I think safe waters. Yeah.
Water. I was like, deep water, safe water. Safe water makes more sense.
Yeah. We've been on for a while. I could talk forever. This is so good. But there's more to my story that's connected with this. So real quick synopsis of Safe Waters and how that came about. So I'm going to unload a lot here. So are you familiar with Operation Fouled Anchor with the Coast Guard Academy? Okay, so all those talks, this is what I wanted to circle back to. Like, I love that you were there in the 90s talking to these people and these staff people about this stuff, because they weren't listening to you. So,
right.
So,
now
yeah.
They're like, check done.
So in 2023, you could look up it was on CNN, they released this report. It was about decades of sexual assault abuse at the Coast Guard Academy that was covered up by admirals, by commandants, by supervisors of the academy. And it was like a 30-year report from early 90s or late 80s to mid 2000s. And yeah, it blew up. And that's what led me to be a victim advocate. Like I saw that in the news and I'd already started sharing my story. I created my own little podcast called Sailor's Disgrace, where I got rid of my shame and guilt. And this is post my second marriage. Like when after I got married, I started feeling good about myself and getting rid of all these things. And I became a victim advocate. I was invited to speak at Coast Guard headquarters because part of the response to the CNN story was we got to get ahead of this and do collateral damage, reduce collateral damage. So they came up with all these programs and policies, and they wanted to hear from survivors. So I went and spoke to all the admirals of the Coast Guard and shared my story. And I was invited to record my story. They're like, we're going to use your story in training so people can hear you. I'm like, cool, let's do this. So I recorded my story with 2 other survivors. And then they don't release our stories. A memo is leaked to me from Coast Guard headquarters says we cannot release these videos because it makes it look like sexual assault is still a problem within the service. Right. That was released to CNN, that memo. I get called by Senator Blumenthal's office. I'm now a whistleblower under the DHS. I'm invited to speak in a Senate hearing. I do that with 4 other survivors. And when that goes out, another person reaches out to us, another Coast Guard survivor, is like, let's do something. Because right now, these things aren't working. Like the Coast Guard's blowing smoke. They're not helping people. They're just doing image protection. Let's form a group of survivors, peer-to-peer support for survivors. And I was like, this sounds like what we need to be doing. So we did. And we launched like a little over a year ago. Safe Waters, we're a nonprofit, and it's survivor-led, survivor-focused, and it's all about the things that fall through the cracks when we have all these Coast Guard policies. And again, some of them are really good. There's a lot of things. We have SARCs, we have victim advocates, we have processes in place to help people. But once you go through that checklist, like for me, for example, when my case was closed, no one cared. Like I'm just on my own, right? I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't feel comfortable talking to people. There was no community to embrace. So we created this community. And since we've launched, I think we have over 70 people just within the Coast Guard and even other branches that have reached out for help. So it's awesome. That's a quick synopsis. So
no, that's good. I know. I was like, oh gosh, we're out of time. I'm thinking the last couple things that more recently are helpful, right? In your survivor journey healing process. What would you want our listeners to know? Anything that's unique or things that you've tried and not worked, or, we're all about sharing advice here. I think that I'd like to hear a couple of those. And then just a last thing about what's, you mentioned what's next, but also what's next for you personally. So
sure. Thanks.
2 like good things that, or not good things, like things like don't try this.
Yeah, don't try numbing it yourself, right? Whatever that might be, right? And for me, like the alcohol is obvious, but even the work was good, but I did it to avoid and to escape from what I really needed to face, right? So those are 2 things I would say avoid if you can. And don't judge yourself if you're going through that. That's the other piece. I judged myself harshly once I got on the other side of it. I was like, oh, I was so stupid. I was like, no, I was doing the best I could with what I had. And that's okay. It got me to this point, right? So understand that about yourself. Second, or the other thing I would say about good stuff, things I wish I had, especially earlier in my journey, community. I wish I had, because I've seen it open people up so beautifully, and it's painful and scary and hard, but when you have people there that go, I understand, I feel you, I love you, it's okay, and you're not alone, that is one of the most powerful things that a survivor can have. So I'd say, find your community, whatever that is, right? And embrace it.
Julian, to that point, I guess I want our listeners to absolutely know one good thing, which is why I founded Take Back the Night as an organization. It was that sentiment, Julian. Like, so I didn't, I started out telling you my domicile was like place to place, but the times I got to speak, not when it was required, like where I might not talk to a survivor. Well, I always talk to survivors, but where it was for Take Back the Night, where they were having an event with like a vigil and a speak out, and we were all collectively, even though I was a guest there, it was like I was part of the team for a moment, and we all just unconditionally loved on each other, and just knew unspoken things, right? So I love that you said that, and I just wanted to remind our listeners, like, Take Back the Nights are happening everywhere all over the world, and more places are doing them. And it's just one night, one event, and sometimes during the day. But it's a pretty rare thing that someone would tell any survivor, if you lived in the community, that you can walk in and do the event with them. It's a pretty amazing experience. So I want everyone listening to know, like, do find a community, and it doesn't have to be like a therapy group. It can just be this one time where you show up at an event. And this is a funny thought I just had. You know how some people make it a goal, like, I'm going to go to every baseball stadium and see every game? Like, I haven't heard the person who's like, I'm going to go every Take Back the Night. I'm going to make it through all of them. But that would be impossible, probably, because they're clumped a lot. But I'm just thinking, I wanted to sit with that for a moment and just talk about what that could mean. Like, it doesn't mean like, it doesn't necessarily mean what you expect it to mean. I think it means, like, just people who get this issue and get you and know how hard it is. And another thing, I don't know if you agree with it too, but I feel like even on the podcast, those of you listening, like, oh my gosh, we're meeting like all the different survivors of the rainbow. And we all have these unique and different and terrible stories, but the commonality is like the vulnerability. Like, there's so many common themes, and I don't think the common tie is that we never deserved it, and it has robbed us of many things, and we are reclaiming what we now choose to. So anyway, I'm so happy you said that about community, Julian. That was awesome. But I'm also, I guess, for any of our military folks, like, is Safe Waters only for Coast Guard? And is it only, you mentioned 70 people, is it all Coast Guard folks?
We are Coast Guard centric, like we're Coast Guard led, but we do service all branches. So I've had people from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines reach out for help, and we'd never turn anybody away, of course. So yes, bring them all. So anybody out there that's listening and just wants to drop a line, like, absolutely, we'll take your call.
And do you all have meetings, or do you have a Discord server going? Like, you do? You have like a platform where you can come and gather?
Yeah, so far it's all digital, but we also do group talks. We have like a book club that we do. We do weekly meetings with that, and we do several different kinds of discussions. I'm building a men's group specifically right now, male survivors. We're hard to crack sometimes, so we're trying to get more male survivors to join our group. But we're creating these spaces digitally, and we're also going out and visiting different Coast Guard military units in person, and we're just getting awareness and building up support. And so we're still forming in that stuff, and we're hoping to get like chapters and build up different regional areas of support and more brick and mortar type stuff. So it's coming. It's all part of our plan.
Maybe even having a Take Back the Night event at one of the bases would be a good way to, because it's sort of sneaky. Like, I think sometimes those events, because they're just open and they offer a lot of things, and someone doesn't just wear a label like I'm a survivor, they could just be a supporter and come, and that might be an interesting way to foment some more membership.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. I love it.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that at some point. But last thought. So, oh my gosh, so happy to have you on the show, Julian. You were so vulnerable, and like, gosh, I feel like you probably didn't even tell us most of this bad stuff, but you told us enough for us definitely to understand you and how you navigate and how you think about your next step. So that was the last thing I was going to say. What do you mentioned a few things. Is there anything else we missed that you're also trying to do next?
So next, personally, retiring from the service officially. I'm very excited. So I'll grow a beard. That's gonna be first thing. But outside of that, I'm actually going to grab
the whole thing, or just a stash?
Full thing, at least for a while, since I haven't been able to for 23 years. Just to do it. But I'm going to grad school in the fall here in Santa Barbara for counseling psychology, and I'm excited. I'm really going to feel that out and see where it takes me. But either start a practice or I want to write, so I'm thinking about doing more writing and obviously weaving my story into stuff, but other survivors, and there's so many things and ideas. But anyway, that's my next step, and then spend more time with my kids. Now that I won't have a job, it's gonna be great. So so that's my big thing. Mm-hmm.
Well, Julian, I appreciate you so much, and I'm just so glad. I would not have known about your good work, and except for us meeting just for a second. I wasn't even there that long and had to fly back. But that was just really, I just knew I had to have you as soon as I met you on the show. So I'm really glad we made this happen. So we will all look out for all the good things you're doing and cheer you on as you go to grad school. That's never quite simple, although you sound like you could probably do anything you put your mind to. And for our listeners, I again, that's why I said at the beginning, get that journal back out, because there's always some new and amazing part of someone's story that I'm certain will benefit each and every one of us. So together we are absolutely thriving, and we are healing, and stay tuned until next week when we see you again. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Dear Katie. These conversations are never easy, but they're always necessary, and we're so grateful you chose to share this space with us. If something in today's episode stirred something within you, please give yourself what you need. Whether that's rest, support, or just a deep breath, you're not alone. To hear more stories, resources, and survivor-centered conversations, be sure to subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We want to hear from you, so please leave us a review and share your feedback. Your thoughts help us create episodes that resonate with listeners. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.